Hey everybody, welcome back to the RGR Football Channel. My name is Daniel Harms. Today, I want to try something a little bit new. I think that we've run out of rantable information in the last couple of weeks, so I want to take a little bit of detour. And I know that this may not be for everyone, but I also know that there's a lot of people in not just our community, but in the entire Twitter sphere, like in the world, that play fantasy football. I do have my connections with the fantasy football astronauts, so I've been getting more comfortable with talking about it in general. So I think that we can do kind of a Chiefs centric video for you guys today, and we can break that down into something more later if you guys enjoy this kind of content. And I'm more than open to hearing suggestions you guys have for some more fantasy content. So we're going to start today with some of the actual obvious fantasy implications for some of the Chiefs players. There are three players that we all know essentially could be finish as their respective number one finishers in fantasy football this year. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill can all finish as the QB1, tight end one, which Travis Kelce likely will, and Tyreek Hill could also finish as the wide receiver one this year. I think that's very, very likely if he stays healthy for all 17 games. So those guys are going to go in the first few rounds. I think that depending on what you're doing in terms of playing a best ball draft, doing a startup, doing a super flex startup, or you're doing just a regular redraft league, Patrick Mahomes is going to be a pretty high end pick. That's just how it's going to be, especially if you're doing a startup, one QB startup. He's probably going to go near number one overall. So, but if we're talking about redraft leagues, I think that we can zero in on probably the third, second round for Patrick Mahomes. I think that's probably where we're seeing him go right now. Uh, and that's getting a bit much for quarterback play. But if you're willing to spend up for a guy like Mahomes, which I know a lot of you are, then that's what you want to do. It's essentially like a zero running back type thing where you take someone in the first round, whether that be Travis Kelce, depending on your pick, or Tyreek Hill, depending on your pick, and then you follow back up with Patrick Mahomes and get that stack. So I totally understand going that direction, especially if you can come back later and get like a Clyde or someone like that. Who that's actually what we're going to talk about right now. Clyde is an interesting player this year because we all know last year he was being drafted as a top flight running back. He was being drafted in the first round in a bunch of redraft leagues, in startups, everywhere. He was being overhyped because he was, in this Andy Reid offense. They got rid of everything. They wanted to bring in running backs. We all know running backs do well in Andy Reid's system. And unfortunately for him, the offensive line just didn't stand up. And that's not all his fault. So this year, you're seeing a rebound in his value. So we're looking at right now his overall PPR running back consensus is about 16. He's going as the running back 16. That is value, my friends, and that's exactly what we're talking about with taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire above his draft position as running back 16. That's what I'm doing right now. I get him in late second, early third drafts a lot. I do best ball drafts, I do startups. I'm going to be starting up my redrafts here in a little bit. So all of these things, his ADP really meshes well with what we're going to see him do this year, because I guarantee you he's going to be used more in the passing game. His touchdowns are going to go up. Andy Reid used him a bunch in the first half of the season on the red zone, in red zone carries and goal line carries. That's not going to go away. This offensive line is going to rebound, and they're going to give him more opportunities again in the red zone to bring that touchdown equity up. This is the time to go get Clyde Edwards-Helaire. His value is probably going to start creeping up in dynasty leagues. If you haven't started to get him earlier than now, it's probably going to start creeping back up. But if we're talking about getting him in redrafts and things like that, his value is still going to be good for you, especially good for your team. You can start in the first, if you have like the first round pick in the entire draft at the 101, you can go, Christian McCaffrey and bring it back around with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and maybe even snag someone on the turn there, because you're going to have two picks in a row. So you might be able to get a high wide receiver as well as Clyde, depending on how your draft board plays. So I really like his value right now. He's going to be a huge guy who outperforms his ADP in my opinion. I think he's going to be finish as a RB1 this year, a top 12 back in the NFL in terms of fantasy production. I really believe that he could get near 1,800 total yards on the season. So I'm really, really big fan of what is going on with his ADP and the fact that I believe that he's going to be used much like he should be. And I think that he's going to be the third leading receiver on the Chiefs. Speaking of receivers, we are going to go into everyone that's not Tyreek Hill. The biggest, probably the biggest thing we're going to talk about here with McCole Hardman. This is going to kind of segue into my film review for the week, which will come out tomorrow. And right now, in PPR formats, McCole Hardman's being drafted as the number 58 overall wide receiver, which I definitely understand. There's a lot of people who are out on him for obvious reasons. He had back-to-backs. His first year was considering, the wide receivers on the depth chart. He had a good season with those touchdowns, with 500 yards. He made the most. He was the most very efficient player, obviously with that yards per catch being near 20, a little bit over 20 yards per catch. So we're seeing that came down last year with having more receptions, not being as big of plays as they were, excuse me, in his rookie year. And he's being drafted as the 58th wide receiver in drafts, which is about the overall player of 158, just around that. So he's a guy who I've gotten quite a bit of shares of this past offseason in best balls in some of the startups I've done. I've taken him in the back quarter of rounds. To be honest with you, he falls down boards pretty quickly because people don't want that bust potential that he brought last year, getting him a little bit earlier. So they're waiting and taking him. So he's going to be a value play this year at wide receiver. I think that we're going to see a rebound in his fantasy value, and I do believe he'll outperform his ADP. It really just depends on how much he's involved in the offense. If he's not getting a bump in his snap percentage, then we're going to have an issue. And I think that's going to be what greatly impacts his fantasy value this year, because without Sammy Watkins, they're going to have to do a better job of facilitating everybody else in the offense, including McCole, down the field, not just on schemed up targets and things like that. So somebody that I've liked to target and acquire this year. Byron Pringle is another one of those, wide receiver, 95 in PPR, consensus player overall 297. He's not being drafted very much at all, and that has a lot to do with the fact that people just don't know much about Byron Pringle. They don't know that he runs, a 4.4, that he's actually a very good route runner and can create some separation, can go get the football a little bit, and also can actually do some things after the catch. He's not the twitchiest guy in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but he's also, if they use him as a returner, he's going to give you some touchdown equity, possibly as a returner. I think that they might switch some things up in the return game, maybe with Jerick McKinnon or a guy like, I personally would not Maurice French, but I think that they're going to see either Pringle or French or McKinnon as a return type guy. And Pringle already showed you last year he can get you a touchdown in the return game. So his draft position is much more value based and much more of a dart throw in terms of where you're drafting him. But I think that he's going to have value this year, not only outperforming that ADP by a mile, but I think that he's going to solidify himself, at least early in the season, as that X receiver. And I think that Mahomes trusts him enough, and they got hopefully this last offseason they got on the same page and they are able to work some things through. But I really like Byron Pringle this year. Demarcus Robinson's a guy we all know I'm not high on. He makes weird plays in terms of he can make this great double move on the outside against some guys like Casey Hayward last year against the Chargers. He made a great double move, and the year before with the great one-handed catch against the Ravens. He has these weird breakouts, and he's very much a boom or bust player. He's probably going to have a little bit of that too. So if you want to dart throw with Robinson, definitely you go ahead. You just got to find a way to really pick the matchup and assume which game he's going to play well in, which is the biggest issue in terms of figuring that out. And then the last guy we're going to talk about today, because I don't want to jinx anybody, I'm going to knock on wood here before I say anything, but if Clyde Edwards-Helaire were to miss time in any stretch, that would lead a huge workload to Darrell Williams. That is value type picks, guys you handcuff, in redraft leagues, you like to, get some handcuffs. Say you don't get Clyde Edwards-Helaire, take Darrell Williams later in the draft. He's being taken right now as running back 59 in PPR, the overall 207th player in drafts. Like that, this is a guy you could handcuff in running back, in any league you want. You can have him on your roster. Just wait for those times where he maybe is a lead back. Even he might even garner flex play because I think Andy still likes what he brings to the table. He might end up being a third down type back this year again. We don't really know how that's going to play out, but Darrell Williams makes plays. That's just what he does. And he showed you last year in the playoffs that you can trust him with the football. He's not going to fumble it. He's not going to do the wrong thing. He's going to go where you need him to go. You need him to get a yard and a half. He's going to get a yard and a half. If you need him to get a touchdown here, he's going to find a way to get into the end zone. He's going to pay off as a handcuff, as some of these value picks later in drafts. I really like targeting Darrell Williams later because, especially if you don't get Clyde, if you are someone that likes to assume injury in players, then yeah, you go ahead and you take Darrell. Or if you just like having Chiefs on your roster, as we all really do, I think that he's a very good play. You might be able to get some flex value out of him. They're independent of Clyde in and of itself, but I think that in the worst case scenario that Clyde ends up missing some games here or there because of injury, Darrell will come right in and give you that value that you didn't have, that you maybe had missing all year. So I really like him as a value play. So that's what we're going to wrap this up today. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. And like I said, if you have any suggestions, any questions you have fantasy related, or whatever, anything you want, go ahead and put them in the comment section. We'll talk about them. And if you guys like this, we'll do a little bit more breakdowns of maybe some AFC West potentials. Maybe we look at some defenses. Maybe we look at the Chiefs defense ability to create points if you're in a redraft league that likes to use defenses. So anything you guys want, just let me know. I appreciate it. You guys have a great day.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.